Hi, folks. Welcome to Thursday's edition of the iWrite Radio podcast. Full house today. Got Mr. Hutton with us. Hi, Jimmy.
All right, mate.
And Stuart Lockhead. Hi, Stuart.
Hello there.
And I'm Norris Stewart. We're going to go with FMQs because I think it will drag most of the headline stuff in with what was asked of the First Minister today at Holyrood. Ruth Davidson, she kind of avoided everything to do with coronavirus because it's looking very like Westminster is about to follow in the footsteps of Scotland once again and shut down hospitality after the weekend. So I suppose she didn't really want the First Minister to get an opportunity to point out that they were all moaning about something their own government was going to do. So what did she go with? Stuart.
Well, you could say it was part 3. She started last week with the warm-up act, if you remember, was Oliver Mundell, who accused the First Minister of lying and got thrown out of the chamber. And then the next day we got all 4 questions led by Ruth Davidson on whether the First Minister was telling the truth about the Alex Salmond affair. Am I wrong to call it the Alex Salmond affair, or shall we continue to call it the Alex Salmond inquiry?
It's what it actually is. I mean, it's actually an inquiry into the civil service complaints procedure.
It's a word I like, because the Thomas Crown affair I always thought was one of the finest titles for a movie.
I worry it sounds like Alex Salmond had an affair there, mate. Could we not just call it Evans Gate, because that's who it's all about at the end of the day.
Okay then. So we got to part 3 today, and it wasn't no great surprise. This time I think the First Minister was more prepared. Whereas last week I think she did lose her rag a wee bit. This week she didn't. Her best line was, one minute you're suggesting I was part of a conspiracy against Alex Salmond. Now you're saying I colluded with Alex Salmond. Make up your mind. And the other point was, of course, as you pointed out, Nori, one of them, Ruth Davidson, she was throwing a dead cat because she was trying to avoid talking about the virus, whereas the First Minister wanted to talk about the virus and didn't want to talk about what Ruth Davidson wanted to talk about. So it was a bit odd.
Much as I'd like to pull you on the dead cat, I'm not really sure this is a dead cat. Jimmy?
Well, as I said, mate, the First Minister was at pains to point out how they had done everything studiously correctly, but that the Scottish Government, i.e. the civil service, had made an error. The error was actually Nicola's. The error was in trusting Lesley Evans. This entire thing came about because Lesley Evans pushed for a disciplinary procedure to be put in place. And at the very last minute, as Stuart pointed out yesterday, the First Minister recused herself or allowed herself to be manipulated to the point where all the power in that disciplinary procedure went from her office or the office of First Minister into the hands of a civil servant who then abused that power. And frankly, I think it's time Lesley Evans was put front and centre. She's managed to obfuscate, forget, possibly tell porkies to the parliamentary inquiry, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if they're under oath. Anybody can break an oath. It's whether I would suggest that she operates in an area where she doesn't give a monkeys about Holyrood. Holyrood only pays her salary, and making an oath to Holyrood is meaningless to her. But that was the error in trusting Lesley Evans. Frankly, Nicola's made a couple of mistakes. Craig Murray points out quite clearly that either she is telling porkies or Geof Aberdein is. The Craig Murray piece, I'd recommend anybody to have a read it, because if you still believe that Nicola has nothing to hide whatsoever, read that and make your own decisions. Today, I kind of had to laugh at Ruth, if I'm honest. She was desperate, as you say, not to talk about the pandemic. when, I mean, the line that Nicola keeps coming out with about, you know, I'm leading the government through this pandemic. She didn't need to repeat that 4 or 5 times. It makes her look weak. She is doing a great job in that. We know that. Ruth, to be honest, I think she's desperate to get away. I've no idea what kind of extra cash they're paying her to basically stand in front of the cooker and keep the pots boiling until such time as Dougie Ross comes up to stand in front of the cooker. But whatever it is, it's no worth it. She'd be as well doing in London, because she could do her game shows. She could be on Peston in person rather than just doing it via via Zoom. And she really doesn't like us uppity Scots actually having an answer to the things that she's got to say.
I think it's shown an actual practical problem, and I think it will apply to almost any investigation instigated by any of the home nation's civil service against ministers. If you're in a position of leading a party and it's one of your own ministers, it's almost essential you recuse yourself from the decision making, because you're going to get accused of putting a paw in and muddying the waters. The minute you do that, you hand what, as you've said, you then hand the power for the decision making to an unelected civil servant. You better hope they don't have an axe to grind.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, Jimmy. I think that was not possibly an error. It was the right thing to do. The error was the system didn't have somebody without a vested interest to make the decisions.
Yeah, it's like Alec Neil's calling for a judicial inquiry. Perhaps an ex-judge would have been in a better placed at that point to take over the entire process rather than a civil servant, because I think it's certainly from Miss Evans' past career and her past pronouncements, I think she most definitely had an axe to grind, and she has been grinding it into Alex Salmon for around 18 months now, trying to get the sinews of his neck to snap, and she's not managed it yet.
I was very depressed after reading the Craig Murray piece. I just had visions of the unforeseen consequences of certain members of the Yes Movement's actions being the seeds of destruction of
there's also
the Yes Movement.
There's also the detail of the timing of the decision to recuse herself by the First Minister. Everything happened on one day. Was it the 19th of December? Something like that, 2017. In that day, they had 8 or 9 different versions of the policy that they'd been developing, which was a policy change that would suddenly include previous ministers
Retrospective complaints.
Retrospectively. And at the moment that went in, the First Minister was kind of obliged to recuse herself. But up to that point,
I don't think she was. I think if she'd taken a backward step at that point and said, hold it, throughout this entire process, the office of First Minister has borne responsibility, and suddenly you're taking that responsibility unto yourself. I need to think about this because there could be serious ramifications. But I didn't think Nicola took the time at that point. I don't know why, but she didn't take the time to step back and say, why do you wish to remove my office completely from this entire thing?
I think the desire to be so squeaky clean because of the Me Too movement clouded that judgment. I think there was a desperation to not be accused of what did they know has to be a question to be asked at this point, not to be accused of trying to protect previous accused.
There's also the possibility, guys, that Nicola did have suspicions at that point in time about Alex, and she thought by removing her office from making any of those decisions, she wouldn't be asked questions as to whether she ever had suspicions.
The final draft was published at 3 minutes to midnight. The one that really that finally made the change, which was a very odd time of night to be publishing the final draft of an official document that had such major ramifications.
You'd almost think they were at work.
Who published it?
Nicola Richardson, I think, was the one of her or Judith McKinnon, forget which one.
All right, so it was a civil service
to
publish it at that time of night.
There was James Hine.
It was finally agreed by Nicola Sturgeon at 3 minutes to midnight that this was going to be, this was the draft that they were going to use.
Okay, so Ruth has achieved her aim and got us talking about it again.
Aye.
The point I was gonna make, Stuart, was I was really depressed after reading the Craig Murray piece. Then I watched Nicola answer the question. I think she'll run rings around the committee. As much as I hate Ruth Davidson, mate, I have to agree with her on that one. It doesn't ring true. We've watched Nicola Sturgeon for years, mate. There's no danger she forgot that meeting took place. And the fact that if she's going to insist that she did forget that meeting took place, she's going to look more and more ridiculous every time she opens her mouth and says that. I don't agree with you.
You could be right, mate. There's I've been attacked by Sturgeon loyalists all over the place this morning for telling me I'm the voice of the BBC, for Christ's sake. I mean, come on, the voice of the BBC, me. BBC's never spoken a Leith accent in his bloody life.
What I find really funny about the whole thing is that they expect her to act other than like a politician. She's a politician. She's going to act like a politician. She just normally does it a lot better, or avoids getting herself into positions where she has to do it a lot better.
Well, I mean, she has to be a super woman. Given this week, she's having to deal with a second wave.
Yeah, and everybody's delighted. And the fact of the matter is, they don't want to put this on hold. They don't want it to be the political playing field to be cleared so the pandemic can be dealt with. They want to do what they're accusing her husband of wanting to do. They want to put as much pressure on her and hope she crumbles under the pressure.
Aye.
There's no doubt about it.
It's interesting that Linda Fabiani was quite so easily manipulated to come out with her statement last week. Because you're right, this kind of thing. I know Mr. Salmon's desperate to get in there and clear things, but he made it clear when he walked out of court that this all could wait. It wasn't for that day or any other day in the near future, as he put it, for the truth to come out and everything to be laid on the table, basically.
Well, in that basis, Jimmy, you've got to ask why. Yes, we probably do need a judge-led inquiry, but right now that's just going to drag it on until the election for sure.
No, I mean, a judicial inquiry wouldn't even start until next year now.
This is an exercise in beating up the SNP. This is not about getting to the bottom of. This is political pressure has forced this investigation.
No, you're right. When you look at the Paul Hutcheon piece in the Daily Record,
I mean,
it's entirely focused on beating up the SNP.
It's the only way they can make a dent on the SNP. They've tried for years to make a dent parliamentary-wise, and they can't do it. The SNP just keep getting stronger. Well, so this is the only thing they've got now. Fortunately, we've got Richard Leonard to bring us back to the mediocrity of opposition, because he done a rare job of doing that today. I mean, is that the first time any of you guys remember that a Labour leader in Scotland quoting the Chambers of Commerce as the backup to his first question? I remember trade unionists and Labour leaders never used to, they wouldn't sit down and have a cup of tea with the Chamber of bloody Commerce. Now they're writing the questions for them.
I noticed that immediately, and I did think that normal weeks it's the unions.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, you're right. That's the first thing I wrote down. Yeah.
Maybe he was watching us and realised that we've all noticed the trade union have been writing these questions, so you've got the Chamber today at this week. It'll be the Rotarian the next week or something.
Well, the Chamber of Commerce effectively is the union of it's the businesses equivalent of a trade union. It represents all the businesses.
Oh, well, I'm not sure they would like that.
Oh, aye, that they might.
I didn't make that up.
It's interesting. It's another case of a unionist politician asking the Scottish government to find a magic money tree.
Aye, there was a few of them doing that today, honest, quite a few. But I mean, I get that they want stakeholders to be involved in the decisions, but they have been. You know, how often did Jean Freeman tell you, for example, that she's sitting talking to the trade unions? John Swinney was talking to the teachers' unions constantly about what was going on with the exams. But at the end of the day, decision has to be taken by ministers. You can't have decision by committee.
Well, can you imagine the guddle fest? The absolute guddle fest. The CBI, the unions, Labour, Liberal Democrats and the Scottish government all sitting in the same room. The politicians desperately hoping a decision's made that's wrong so they can criticise the government. The CBI wanting all the money to go to the employers and the unions wanting the money to go direct to the employees.
It'd take them about a week and a half to work out the menu for the sandwiches that they were going to have on the table while they were having the meeting. Because you couldn't have that, man. That's for the bosses, and the unions couldn't have that, you know.
And then Richard Leonard would be standing up next week asking them why it took so long to come to a decision. Stakeholders are complaining because you didn't come to a decision quickly enough.
Well, look, it was I started to notice the personalities and the personal relationship between the First Minister and the questioners, especially the other ones. You know, Richard Leonard. Well, so what? Patrick Harvie. I found him he was being very careful. You know, he had a reasonable point of view to make. I was struck by the way that, as I say, her response to Willie Rennie, they were like old school pals, really, for a change.
Well, she didn't want to make him look a complete ass, eh? Basically, he appeared annoyed that she's not came up with a cure for COVID yet, which is a bit rich.
I know. She was,
and Paddy.
Anna Sarwar, I mean, she didn't, again, it was as though they'd been at school together.
Well, they are at school together, mate. They're sitting there. That's the problem sometimes with politicians. They're sitting there in their nice wee centrally heated building on 80k a year, and they do sit and have discussions. They do sit and work things out. The problem is, I mean, you had Paddy Harvie and Anna Sarwar as well. They're asking for, you know, Paddy Harvie is wanting testing regimes that he can't describe. He can't tell you what that testing regime is going to be because he's not got a Scooby. He just wants a better testing regime than what they've got now. And he certainly can't tell you where the money's going to come from. He can't tell you where the swabs are going to come from because we can't get them for Roche anymore. But he's demanding a better test regime.
Well, what was Sarwar's question?
Oh, dearie me, where are we?
I missed it.
He wanted a health impact assessment for the entire nation and to work, if there's one being done, to publish it. And if no, why no?
Yeah, and then she said, well, we assess all our actions against the four harms. She gave her an excuse to mention that COVID deaths compared to flu deaths, they've done a review in England and they are much worse. And therefore, there's every reason for taking the serious measures they have. Just one last personal point. I think when Pauline McNeil asked the question of single-parent families, I could, under her breath, I could hear Nicola saying, "Phew, not the virus, not Alex Salmond. Thanks, Pauline."
Well, that's because it's a planted question, eh?
Well, Pauline McNeil's Labour, but I think they're probably pals, you know.
Was Pauline McNeil, did she not front some big quango? Did she not get an appointment for the Scottish government to chair some quango before she came back?
Oh, maybe did. Who really got it? Peter Chapman. That was that gave the First Minister a chance to stick it to the Tories, because Peter Chapman's question was about Ivan McKay had rubbished the Freeports plan that the UK government have got. And the First Minister said, look, Freeports are not a substitute to the EU single market. Take that.
I've got a clip of Kate Forbes dealing with him. Would you like to see it?
Oh, yeah.
On you go.
I'm hoping this will work because it's, what do you call it? Where am I? Share screen. Computer sound. Now you'll be able to tell me if this is. What is this?
That's an advert.
Oh,
That's what that is, Norman. That's an advert.
Well, this is.
So just finally on my other question, can I move to the other element of business, namely property and business rates? And whilst I totally appreciate your lack of business experience, do you understand why the low percentage error is neither insignificant nor insubstantial?
Well, I can only thank you for sharing your own business experience and enlightening me. When it comes to non-domestic rates, any extension of the relief for next year will be dependent on what the UK government does, because we have put in place £972 million when it comes to funding that rates relief for a year. Right now, because your government cannot get its act together and provide certainty. Of course, it can provide certainty on Brexit, because that will always take priority over providing certainty to the taxpayers and the communities and the businesses of this country. But because your government cannot get its act together and provide clarity in next year's budget, it means that we're left in the position of not knowing whether or not we can extend that rates relief. So I would suggest that if Alexander Burnett cares about the businesses within his constituency, or the businesses that he has, that he should start lobbying his own government to ensure that there is that certainty and that clarity before we hit the cliff edge. And might I suggest that doing what the Chancellor did with furlough, which is to provide the clarity a matter of weeks before it comes to an end, and a matter of weeks after most businesses have started issuing redundancy notices, is not the way to manage non-domestic rates relief.
I mean, with her lack of business experience, she's incredibly talented and for her age, very experienced finance secretary.
Well,
Who's ever going to trust a Tory called Sandy Burnett anyway? It just reeks.
How dare you? My father was called Alex.
I like the idea the Tories have that to be Chancellor of the Exchequer, what you need is business experience.
Well, Rishi Sunak's not got a lot, has he? Well, fair play. He did make a lot of money, but not of his own.
No, he was a banker.
He's a banker. He's he's probably even worse, hedge fund manager or something.
But obviously, all economic decisions should be taken to make life easier for business.
Obviously, Kate's no one for being mansplained about anything, though, because she certainly booted his chuckies on that one.
Who else asked good questions? Anybody?
I think I'm out.
Nah, that was a bit it, mate. It really wasn't. Jackie Bailey asked something about cafes, and at that point, Nicola went, there's going to be a cafe exemption. So I'm hoping that for once you're going to be happy with my answer.
That's
because
right.
there will be an exemption for cafes, particularly ones who have licenses, but as long as they are not selling alcohol,
they're
allowed to
exactly.
open.
Jackie Bailey was completely not informed, not up to speed on exactly what was happening to the businesses in her constituency.
She must have got overconfident after I punted her to be the next Labour leader.
I didn't blame her, mate. There were a few people asking that question last night. Obviously, that's why that particular loophole was one of the glaring ones of yesterday's announcement, and obviously that's why they've shut it today. But
there was a almost personal one, which is flaring at Mossmorton, but that's an old story. I say it's only personal because you can see it from here.
Wait a minute.
I seem to recall posted a photograph of the flaring right through the Forth bridges.
I came away thinking that cafes were going to be allowed to open between 6 and 6, so single folk could go and have a cup of coffee together. Has that changed?
No, cafes will be allowed to open, mate. It's just that there was an issue yesterday because if you had 2 cafes in the street and one of them had a license, that cafe was going to be shut for 16 days because it had a license. Now that's not the case. As long as they are not serving alcohol, their license is basically suspended for those 16 days.
I thought that was the case. I thought she announced that.
Well, no, that was you and Jackie Bailey shared the same as.
No, I thought she said cafes, even with a license, could stay open.
Yeah, but yesterday that wasn't the case. No.
Oh, right. Sorry. I thought, well, I must have heard something different. She must have telepathically sent me the right message.
Oh, them life wardens, those soulless, joyless, middle-class, middle management.
Who was it?
That spoil all the fun.
Who is it? Was it Andy Burnham that asked a Conservative government, mark you, to employ more people so that the rules could be better policed?
It probably would be Andy Burnham, mate, because as much as he wears a red rosette, Andy Burnham's a Tory.
I was just thinking, if you want every pub policed properly, that's got to take up at least 25% of the people who are going to be out of work.
They didn't want pubs open, mate. They're fun suckers, these people. They want you to go to work and not go out and enjoy yourself.
Well, I agree with them. I don't see any need for pubs whatsoever ever again.
That's just because you've got a cracking set of whiskey that you need to get erst. You're quite happy to sit in the house and tan that.
Which brings me to Stuart's. Stuart picked up that piece in the Record by, what's his name? The doom and gloom piece.
Oh, Neil McKay.
Oh, Neil McKay.
Oh, God. That's the one that really cheered up Jimmy, isn't it?
Has anybody checked he's all right? Sounded like he was away to go and burst out a Wilkinson sword and do his wrist and his throat. Man, that was brutal.
It is. I have to say, unfortunately, it comes close to the way I keep seeing it at times, right from the start of this pandemic. It's we're all doomed, to be honest.
You're me. Doomed.
We're doomed. It's going to get a lot worse.
I'm sorry, the people that think this is going to lead to some sort of apocalypse in society, even a good apocalypse.
Get spit it out, Norman.
You know what I mean?
Aye, that one.
I can't see it. There will be shifts. Working from home, I think, will be one of the major ones. Online shopping, I think, is just going to happen a few years earlier. It'll be a bigger wave a few years earlier.
I tell you, invest in Fife. That's where it's going.
No, although let's be clear, I'm tempted to go for a few bevies in Fife over the weekend because they're no shut.
No. I thought they were.
No, Forth Valley's shut, mate. Fife's fine. You can go over to Dunfermline and get as tanked up as you want.
And in fact, Shirley Ann Somerville, who we used to interview every week, her constituency includes Kincardine, which is actually in Fife, but in Forth Valley Health Board. So she was trying to find out if the pubs would be open in Kincardine or no.
Well,
Stuart, Ken, what's mental? Stuart, Ken, what's mental, mate? The Green Welly's going to have to shut.
Up in Tyndrum.
All the way up in Cree and Larach is in Forth Valley. So because of their licence, they're not going to be able to operate in the same manner, which is just mental, man.
Good. Anything that discourages hill walking is a good thing.
It's no, but it's also a transport. It's also a transport cafe. That's where the lorries stop in the middle of the night.
It's a vital spot when you're on your way to somewhere nicer than Leith, Norrie.
And that should only be balanced by getting these lorry drivers off the roads.
Oh, I'd agree with that, but at least they're not in Edinburgh, mate. Hanover Street got shut last night so that Scottish Power could dig up the pavement, and it's still shut today. That's how crap Edinburgh is now. Imagine
Jimmy, have you found a road into Leith yet that hasn't got roadworks on it?
Aye, but it's kind of a path through St Mark's Park, and then even then I get stuck because I've got Warriston Road shut.
I mean, don't tell.
Warriston Road shut, I know.
Aye, Warriston Road shut so people didn't use it as a rat run, mate.
I would think
Shut
like
it in the
that. I
park.
know what I was going to say. I mean, Jimmy, you wouldn't tell everybody on this program anyway, otherwise it'd get awfully busy and you wouldn't be able to use it yourself to get into Leeds.
That's all right. I didn't think we've got that many listeners.
So,
mate.
So is it? Where's Warrison Road shut? At the park? At the back
It's shut at St
corner?
Mark's. It's shut at St Mark's Park, mate. Aye, basically you can't
the
go up it to
bridge.
get on it Ferry Road.
You know the wee hump bridge over the
Aye.
walkway? Aye, just there. It's got barriers there.
Right, folks. We'll do a travel review. I think now that Jimmy's back on the roads.
No, but seriously, mate. I was thinking that, you know, I was having a wee rant to myself about the modelers, because the modelers have got sod all right throughout this pandemic. And then who are modelers? And are they just clever? Are they just smart? They get to about third year in university and think, Kim, what? I'm actually quite crap. I'm going to get a 2-2 here. I'll go into modelling because I can get a job in modelling at 100 grand a year, and I'll never ever be judged on my results, because the results are only come out after the fact. They never have to be right about anything. I'm going to
enlighten you a wee bit, Jimmy, because what they're really talking about it's sociologists that do it, and the one data set that sociology always starts with that is the most reliable is suicides, and it's the first one that you can compare societies with. You know, I mean, if there's 3 times the suicide rate in Manchester than there is in Liverpool, well, there's got to be a reason, isn't there?
Interestingly, none of our governments are going to publish suicide rates this year, Stuart. They'll just gloss over that part.
And when I was studying at university, the most, I suppose, the most scientific of social scientists was the guy who did health sociology. And sociology or behavioral science, it was the behavioral scientists. The guys that do the modeling, they are used heavily in health.
But they've been wrong throughout this. They've been wrong for the start. So why are we
I'm not telling
relying on their judgments to make calls that could put...
Excuse me. I'm not sure they have been wrong, Jimmy.
Did one of them predict? Not one of them predicted that care homes would be charnel houses. Not one of them. Or that we actually might have done something about care homes.
No, I'm not saying that they predicted where the deaths would be, but is it no, it's not Cambridge. It's the other London one, London School of Economics, I think. Whatever. Their prediction is very close to what's happening. So they got the initial wave right, they got the drop right, and they're getting the second wave right. Their numbers are very close to what's happening. I don't believe it's
a possibility of 500,000, mate.
No, well, there's been various different models, Jimmy. They haven't all been one. I'm not saying that's the model.
Right, they come out with different models, so they never have to be right.
Well, this particular school of thought, this particular school of thought has been fairly on the button. I don't know if it's any of the governments have followed their model. I don't know.
Well, again, as I said yesterday, mate, we're choosing to put people on the dole queue and shut businesses on the basis of a guess for some smart arse that went to university wasn't good enough to be top of their field, so they decided to go into modelling.
Do you know what the real problem with this whole argument is? That we can't cut the country in half. We can't draw a line up the middle of Scotland, isolate the two halves, open up totally the other half, we'll call it the Hutton theory, and close down the other half, we'll call it the Sturgeon theory, and see how many people die in which half. That's the problem.
No,
we're going to know nothing about what was successful and not successful until maybe 2 years down the line, when you can compare countries. And even then, that no certainty, because different countries look different once you get over the border.
Different countries behave differently.
Exactly.
The Swedish example that people keep throwing in our faces is a nonsense, because the Swedes are one of the most regimented people in the world. The government says jump and 90% of them say how high.
But the point I'm making about this, Jimmy, is, and the fact I'm saying 2 years, it'll be longer than that, till they know the carnage that lockdown
Well, it will be if
caused.
the academics are left to sort out all this stuff, mate, because this could be another 10 years of work for them till they all get retirement.
Well,
I mean, you know, we are in a unique situation because we have no idea the impact on human behavior in this country amongst our friends here in Leith of what's happened with social media and the likes of these populists like Trump and Bojo coming into power, and the amount of garbage that people get fed over the media these days. We've no idea how people would have behaved 10 years ago under the circumstances of this pandemic.
No, and I mean, and all the information that is going to be useful is going to be retrospective. It's all going to be hindsight.
Yeah, but as much as I'm not depressive, certainly I'm no Neil McKay, but you've got a generation of people who are living in abject poverty. You've got students who are going to be coming out of university with degrees that are tainted because they were the class of 2020. They'll still have a 50 grand debt round their neck, and they'll not be able to get a job in the Starbucks.
Well, that is basically what we're pointing out, isn't it? That the actual effects of this in lots of different ways are not going to be known for a long time.
I think whoever said in the 70s and 80s, eat the rich, I think they were right. I think billionaires, a bit of long pig's going to do us all, a bit of good over the...
Well, unfortunately,
start slaughtering the rich.
The billionaires are getting even more billionaire-y.
Well, exactly.
27%, I saw somewhere, increase in their
we'll get 10% richer over the course of this pandemic.
We've got to get them now before their security becomes the actual Lothian and Borders constabulary rather than just the private security they've got to do. Let's get them, slaughter them, spread their money out amongst everybody else. Get them over a roast. Apparently humans taste like bacon, so I quite like bacon.
We need Phil along with his t-shirt.
Smell like pork. I'm not recommending anybody at home listens to a word Jimmy says on this one.
If anybody listens to a word I say, they need to go and have a drink.
He's
anyway.
joking. He's joking.
No. Come on, he's not. He's mild compared to what Phil would be saying by now.
I had Phil visiting at the window yesterday.
Oh, well,
it's Phil's birthday today, gentlemen. We should be raising a figurative glass to Mr. Ettridge.
Well, he's no friend of yours anymore. That's him 70, Jimmy. As far as you're concerned, he should be left to die in squalor, should he not?
Not at all. No, he's no a billionaire, mate. It's the rich that I want to eat, not the bloody nothing else. He's too scrawny. It'd be far too much bone, not enough meat, mate.
Oh, well. Anything else, guys?
I think I should alert our regulars to something I found. What are they called? I'll go to the top. The Edinburgh Yes Hub apparently have a monthly magazine called SAOR ALBA. And I'm not sure if it's printed. It looks as though it's just a PDF. But there's a fun story in there by Tim Rideout, who is, he's kind of keen on modern monetary theory. But he's written a story called The Economics of Independence. Now, part 2 is published in the October version. I need to get hold of the September version to read part 1. It's fiction. It's fiction. It's a fictional story about the day after the yes vote. And I can recommend it. It's funny.
Does it involve rich people being strapped up in the backs of taxis?
It involves the Scottish delegation getting on book an entire sleeper train from Edinburgh and going down to London to complete the final negotiations at Queen Elizabeth Hall in the west of London. They do a deal with David McAllister, the Scottish-German politician.
Oh, McNeil.
So David McAllister's kind of the supporter of the Scottish independence, but he's middle of the road to right wing. But he arranges German equivalent of German of MI5 to come with the Scottish team to sweep the meeting hall
devices.
For devices. I can recommend that.
I'm not reading it if it doesn't involve the whole Scottish delegation flying down to London on unicorns.
No, they
Not
book the whole
interested in-
train and they stay up all night boozing.
Oh, well, I'm not having that. No one have got a unicorn. Bugger that. Okay, guys.
How does unicorn taste, Norrie?
I wouldn't kill one, Jimmy. I wouldn't kill a unicorn. That brings 27 years bad luck. Never mind your 7 years. They have useful horns for Tory arses.
You need a,
Oh, no, that's a horrible thought.
They're not like the ones in the pictures. They're squirrely, like ram's horns.
Have you ever met a Tory that's not an arse like?
Ooh. Right. Okay, guys, on that happy note, wipe that picture from your head.
Yes.
I think we'll call it a day. Nice to have you back, Jimmy. It's 2 days in a row. Great. And thank you, Stuart.
Thank you.
I'm Norrie Stewart. Thanks for listening, folks.
Cheerio.
And we'll catch you tomorrow, Friday, Hat Friday. See if I can actually remember to put a hat on this Friday. Cheers for now, folks.